Right, hello, welcome to Critical Witness. We should be live, and hopefully I'll have a small echo in a moment just to let me know that it's coming through. There we go. So, welcome. We've got Naomi Dawson with us from a whole load of different organisations, which we're going to talk about in a moment. If you haven't been on Critical Witness before, we generally just have a conversation and see where it goes. We're probably going to be talking about evangelism, women in evangelism, as well as student ministries tonight, because that's Nay's cup of tea. But also there's a whole bunch of different things that we might find ourselves discussing. We're a little bit late to the stream just because we kept talking about vaccines and things behind the scenes, but we'll try and keep to the topic at hand as best as we can. If you like what you see, just feel free to subscribe and like the video. I don't usually say this, but it does help get other people into the conversation. Yeah, get involved. Ask us questions as we go, and I'll stop talking and I'll introduce Nay, and Dan's here as well, but he's muted at the moment. Nay, tell us a little bit about yourself. Why are you a Christian, or how are you a Christian? Maybe the story first, and then we'll go from there, really. So, hello, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Thanks, Dan, for inviting me on tonight. So, I'm a Christian because my mum and dad introduced me to Jesus when I was young. But by the time I got to 9, my dad had left our family and left the church. And so it wasn't a typical Christian upbringing in any sense at all. And I just completely owe my faith to the Christians around me in a lovely little church called Killington Baptist Church. They loved us so dearly as a family. So as a teenager, I was the only Christian in my school, and I was really enthusiastic about Jesus. I used to run assemblies on my own, used to run a Christian union, but it was pretty lonely being the only Christian. So I guess once I got to university, it was there that I really met Christians of my own age, similar mindset. And I just really thrived as a Christian at university. So definitely became a Christian, knew Jesus as my saviour as a 7-year-old, but that grew and changed over time. Yeah, so that's me.
Nice one. Cool. And so now you're working with IFES, International Fellowship of Evangelical Students. And is that your full-time job? Or because you seem to be in a lot of different things at the moment.
Yeah, so I work 30 hours a week for IFES, and within that I've got an initiative called Passion for Evangelism that I've set up. So yeah, that's my only job. I do lots of other stuff for fun, but yeah, we work with Christian unions across Europe. I'm their Regional Training Co-Ordinator, and I've got 2 main projects that I've set up. One is raising up female public evangelists, and the other one is training and equipping students and staff to introduce their friends to Jesus through the Gospels. So those are my two main projects.
Cool. So what got you into IFES? I'm just interested in that regard. Do you have much of an international background, or just you like students because that's where you kind of found your faith? What took you there?
Well, so after uni, I graduated. I did a volunteer year with UCCF, University Colleges Christian Fellowship. And I just absolutely loved the opportunity there was within the student world to make friends and to tell people about Jesus. And at university, I saw really good friends, my housemates, become Christians. I saw their fiancés become Christians. And since then, they've led loads of people to faith. So really, I just knew from about 21 that I wanted to commit my life to working with students. So I worked with UCCF for about 16 years, and then it was time to move on. And my husband and I had been involved in the Uncover series with writing Uncover Mark. And there was this opportunity to work across Europe, trying to get loads of students and staff excited about Seeker Bible studies. So really, I just took that opportunity. John and I had wanted to move abroad, but for different reasons, it didn't work. I'm really grateful now we are where we are. But I love the fact I can work for IFES and still live in Southampton.
Nice one. Dan, feel free to jump in whenever. I've noticed that we're wearing the same hoodies tonight.
Yeah,
which is a bit unfortunate.
I've unzipped mine to reveal my football top underneath now, so to distinguish us.
We need to work on the memos here.
Yeah. I was just wondering, so given your kind of vast experience on UK universities, what's Christianity like on campuses? I always seem to think it's slightly it always looks more positive on a campus at a university compared to outside of the university context. Do you think would that be the case, and maybe what it's like in Europe as well? Christianity, how's it doing?
That is a ridiculously big question. I've no idea. Should we just talk about vaccines? That's fine. Yeah.
It's about the same size of question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, generally, I'm always positive, like my friend Phil up there. Or was it Dan that was positive? I can't remember.
Phil.
Oh, Phil, great. I mean, I'm just always encouraged by the student world. I just think students are amazing. And what I've seen across the world, particularly in the pandemic, just responding and adapting to what's going on, putting events online really quickly, trying to disciple people, reach out to people in a pandemic whilst A-levels are cancelled and everything's changed. I just think students are incredible. Picture Christianity, I've no idea. That's just too big a question. But can I just say that the spirit is not in chains, and the spirit does not depend upon material conditions. So yes, church doors physically might have been closed, but the church is alive and kicking, and Christian unions are doing an incredible job across Europe, even in some really tricky situations. So some of my friends in Bosnia, Herzegovina, the universities haven't even opened yet because they just don't know how to accommodate their students safely. So their term's been delayed, but Christian students are still getting out there and loving their friends and speaking about Jesus. So I'm positive, but that's just me.
That probably speaks into why you're involved in so many different things. So one thing that I noticed just come out in regard to Halloween was just another thing that popped up was this houses of light. So do you think your positivity is why, or are you just a naturally creative person in these things? You just sort of seem to come up with an idea and you're able to launch it, which I think is it's one thing to have the idea, it's quite another to be able to launch it and have people take that on board and run with it themselves. So did you, for example, the houses of light, did you get much feedback on that? Did that work?
Yeah, so I mean, one of my friends, Abigail, says that I have so many ideas it just makes her feel sick.
That's one way to put it.
I love her. I struggle a bit. I mean, I have loads of ideas. Ideation and woo are my top strengths finders. So I love having ideas. I can't go on too many bike rides because I just come back with too many ideas. And then I just love making them happen. So the houses of light, I mean, it was quite incredible, really. At the start of term, I just prayed, God, how can I share my faith with my friends? I'm not traveling for work. I'm around Southampton. I'll go crazy. And I felt God say to me, Nay, where do you think you shouldn't be? And I knew the answer was Halloween. Our area love Halloween, like bigger than Christmas. It's just bonkers. And I've never celebrated it personally, and our family has never celebrated it. So what I thought is I'll set up a Bitton Park family fun page on Facebook. I'll get my friends to organise the Halloween trail and I'll organise the Christmas one. It was like my secret plan. Unfortunately, nobody wanted to organise the Halloween trail. So from never having celebrated it, I organised this Halloween trail, but it was amazing. And I just enjoyed it so much. There were 17 of us. We had this trail. We were the House of Light. And about 5 days before, I was like, why not write a simple story that raises curiosity? I'd been looking for an evangelistic tract, and there are loads out there about light and Christmas, but I was just thinking I want to give out hundreds, and I want to give out something that I feel really comfy giving to my friends. So I just I went on a walk and I had this idea about a story about a boy called Alfie, and I wrote it down, realized I sent it off to a publishing company and they said, no, we don't do Halloween stuff. This is not really evangelistic. So I thought, I'll sack it. I'll just make it on Canva and print it myself. So I did that, and I bought 500, and then I promoted it amongst some friends, and we gave out loads across the UK. And we put them in a pretty little bag with a glow stick and sweets. And we gave out about 300 just on our driveway. And then I just thought, well, if I'm giving out this little simple flyer that raises curiosity, I need to link somewhere. So I just made a Facebook page and called it Houses of Light. So yeah, it all happened in about 3 days. But what happened was my friends loved it. We were this amazing, beautiful house. People wrote to me, said, thanks so much. It was so meaningful. And I chatted loads to my friends. They all knew in the kind of Facebook group that I was not a Christian. So they were like, Nay, why don't you make these non-scary pumpkins, like a fairy pumpkin? And I'd watched Glenn Scrivener's excellent video on Halloween.
That's really good.
He talks about laughing at rogues when we think about Halloween. So I was like, that's it. I need to make humorous pumpkins. So I Googled like funny pumpkins, and we bought like these whopper pumpkins the night before. They're about 7 stone each. And because I love swimming, put like snorkels and masks and swim hats on. So we went for funny pumpkins and houses of light because we wanted to laugh at darkness and offer the light. And actually the local swimming pool got in touch and said, can we use your photos for our publicity? So we're in the local swimming pool as well. But yeah, it was great. And we're already planning now our next nativity trail, which is launching in December the 1st. And it's just wonderful because everyone organising with me, majority of them don't know Jesus. They're going to be meditating on scripture as they decorate their houses. So I don't know what the question was, but thanks.
No, that sounds good. Yeah, sounds really good. That's probably an easier question to ask than the state of Christianity across Europe.
Oh, don't even
No, I didn't know. That sounded. I didn't mean it that. But I meant.
Dan, you're so interesting.
I meant from your experience. You know how as someone who spent 16 years with UCCF, I don't know. I always think that Christianity on university campus is just always. It always feels to me like it's doing much better than off the university campus, because I always found it. I think I found it, and a lot of people find it a shock, because you're at university. You've got UCF meetings once a week. You're going to church. You're surrounded by a lot of Christian friends. You're doing lunch bars, mission weeks. And it's all. It's easy to invite. You're regularly inviting people. It seems it normalizes kind of evangelism in a way. It makes it easier because there's always something going on, and always something that you're not necessarily embarrassed to invite your non-Christian housemates and friends to. And then suddenly you come off campus, you get a job, and it's not like that anymore. There's church on a Sunday, and maybe once a year there might be an event that you might feel that's just about okay to invite someone to, or maybe at Easter or Christmas and things like that. And it just becomes just sort of comes off the boil a bit. And I think a lot of people find that. That's just sort of an observation. I know I found that, and I think a lot of people do. And it'd be lovely if we could keep that same kind of spirit, that same kind of what we're doing at campus, but bringing the churches should be like that as well. And it's always sort of frustrated me that there's such a disconnect between what's going on Christianity on the university campus, and then once we're off, that you very quickly get into the habit of not doing what you used to be normal at university. That was my point. That I don't think I explained very well. That's what I was kind of getting your feeling. If you think if that's the case, that's not even really a question.
I don't know. It kind of makes me sad, because the whole point of the Christian Union is that you live and speak for Jesus where you are. So whether that's university, and then for my husband going into lab, for me going into UCCF, like, I don't know, we're part of a really brilliant church here in Southampton Lighthouse Church, and very much our experience is there's opportunity to love and serve people, to share the gospel, to set up events. We're doing an event next week. Where's God in a COVID world? I'm speaking. We've got a COVID 111 doctor. We've got a scientist spearheading quick test. And we've got a pastor who's lost somebody in COVID. Just think, like, I had that idea. I didn't suggest myself to talk. My pastor said you should do the talk. But I had the idea. I shared it. They said, brilliant, let's do it. And we're doing it. Like, I don't know. I just think there's no reason why it should stop at university. And in our city, we've got a fantastic city with churches that work really well together. We're doing something called Love Southampton, where we're trying to meet the needs of the most vulnerable people in the city, but we're doing that together, recognizing we're stronger together as churches than on our own. So I just think life's short, isn't it? Get on with it and bring some change. Sorry, Dan. I'm sure you've got a really nice question out there somewhere.
No. That was good. That was basically like it was a rebuke in a way, but really positively. No, it was a good one. No, it was spot on. But but it's true, because I think because I think that's what happens is you just, I don't know. It becomes because it's not easy. It's not easy to talk to people about Jesus. I don't find it easy. But I think when you're in a context at university, it's easier. The opportunities seem to, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe there's kind of a boldness in groups. And so when all of you are doing it, you're bold, friendships are made quickly, so everything happens fast. Like looking at my own life here, we've lived on this road for 5 years. And, you know, a really good friend of mine who came to Christ just 3 days before she died. I've been friends with her for 5 years. I've been praying for her, getting to know her, loving her family, chatting to her. Didn't know that she'd come to know Jesus that late in her life. She's only less than 30 when she died. But really what I think we forget is people are not projects, and that we're just called to love people, like to delight in them and to serve them and be their friend. And that isn't glamorous, and it takes years and years, but God is at work in those friendships. And so if you'd asked me 2 years ago, was I encouraged in this area with what God is doing? I'd probably say no. Right. Thanks to the pandemic and lockdown, man, I'm so grateful for what God's doing in this area. It's just incredible. So I think we just forget we want stuff now, and maybe that happens at university more for some reason, and it's just slower in the rest of life, and that's okay.
I think it depends on your job as well. I'd say, Dan, that when I was a teacher, I'd probably be in the same boat as you in being wary of how much I probably pushed the boundaries a little bit more than some. Just in, for example, when a student said, well, hasn't science disproved God? I'd kind of jest that I knew their science grades, and also ask them how. and I'd be able to like engage in that regard. And I ran a big questions club, which people knew I was a Christian in that, and brought in some Christian ethics and philosophy into that, and my amateur versions of them. But there was that sort of, I can't push too hard here because I could lose my job for proselytizing. But now that I'm in a job that's very much a Christian mission organization, it is on campus. We're working alongside the university, so that my idea of Christian evangelism and mission has probably shifted substantially in the last 2 years, and making sure that we don't come across like everyone's a project. Everyone, we have all the answers for everyone already before we even know them. But very much my boldness has shifted because of the job that I'm in. And I think it's recognizing that people in full-time work where there's controversial, sensitive issues, where a Christian ethic clashes, that has a significant impact on how readily you share the faith, and possibly even an impact on your faith in general. I would suggest it did on mine as a teacher for a while. But I think there's an interesting aspect. Like, how do you feel now that your job on campus is leading you to be creative in the church? Like, do you feel there's definite overlap in what you're doing and seeing with students? And then do you feel like that's shifted anything, having the bridge between the two?
Actually, one thing, just go back on Dan a sec. Lindsay Brown talks about, he works for IFES, talks about this pyramid, and he says like any national movement with IFES that is doing this is going to flourish. So the bottom is lots of personal evangelism. That's the bottom of the pyramid. The middle bit is small group evangelism, so Seeker Bible Studies or Christianity Explored. And then the top bit of the pyramid is public evangelism. And I do think university Christian unions are brilliant at doing those three together. and looking at church life. We do a lot of personal, a lot of kind of small group stuff. Well, some small group stuff. We don't do much public evangelism at all. And I think we need to kind of reclaim public communication of the gospel, which can be really creative. So I'm talking about TikTok videos, not just a boring evangelistic talk, but like really good evangelistic talks that communicate clearly, that the Christians sit there and think, I want this, as well as the non-Christians. So I think that is probably missing, actually, which is what we're trying to do in Passion for Evangelism, bring back boldness and courageousness and public communication of the gospel. Creativity, to be honest, my creativity, I think, is God-given. It's a gift from him. I'm not really on campus very much at the moment, and I tend to get ideas when I'm on a bike. I think most geniuses have their ideas on bikes. But I find if I'm swimming or on my bike and I'm praying and asking God to inspire me, then ideas just flow. And I think I've got more and more courage and boldness now just to go for it and not really care what Christians think, but to do this to serve and love my mates in this area.
I think going back to what you were saying, Phil, is how the job, I think that what you do for work does impact the kind of space that you feel like able to have those discussions. Because I've had some jobs where I didn't really have any concerns about worrying like what I said was going to get me in trouble, but then I've had other jobs where you feel like you have to be very careful about even if you say the right thing, how it could be interpreted, how someone could be offended by what you've said, and sort of going to be escalated. I think I don't know. That's something I miss. I miss being in a job where I felt I had this kind of freedom to have interesting conversations, and it doesn't really necessarily have to be evangelism, but like just interesting questions about meaning, purpose. Who are we? About origin. All sorts of things. But those sorts of conversations, like ethics, those sorts of questions, lend themselves to eventually, leading you down the road to what could be characterized as evangelism. And
actually, it's funny because thinking about it, none of my evangelistic conversations have happened in work. I mean, it might be because I've not seen a soul since like March. I have done evangelistic talks, but they've not led to conversations because I've just said goodbye and put my laptop down. I just think in lockdown, community is a new apologetic that everyone's desperate for. People are just wanting it so badly. And as Christians, we have the ultimate reason to believe in community. We believe in God, who is Father, Son, and Spirit. So he is relationship community within himself. We've got this ultimate reason. And what we've tried to do as a family is just offer out community and love and hospitality as widely as we can within our friendships. And it's that then has stopped people. And they've said to me, Nay, why do you do so much for other people? Why do you believe in building community? And then I can talk about God. And in fact, the other day, one of the people that was going to run the Halloween trail that didn't said to me, Nay, we need a strong community leader and you're that person. She's not a Christian. So I just think we've got to focus a bit more on like loving our neighbours and building community. And when we do that in a kind of fresh, courageous way that, is a bit awkward, so you've got to take risks. So, for example, we're on a 10-day isolation. This is week 6 of isolating since September. And everyone's a bit miserable. But I thought, why not do a 10-day video challenge? So I put a post up this morning on Facebook. Any parents year 1, year 4 from school, join our 10-day video challenge. No one responded for an hour, and then one person responded. So I spent the rest of the day saying, come on, this is going to be really fun, like phoning people up. And tonight we had 21 entrants. People were loving it. We're going to do another one tomorrow. If you look on my Facebook, you'll see my husband's entry. But it takes a certain level of boldness and courage for me even just to do that. But as I do that, people write to me and they're like, Nay, thanks so much. I got given Prosecco yesterday because of what I do for the community. And amazing. I just think we've got it the wrong way around. So if we're not chatting people or having those conversations, it's probably because we just need to get out there and pray for more opportunities to love people and actually get to know them. And I think like rule of 6 is really interesting. And then rule of 1 is really interesting. So I think the rule of 6 is really good for friendships. 6 is a magic number. I've been reading about professional gatherers, and they talk about 6 being a magic number because you have high levels of intimacy and sharing. So when the rule of 6 came in, I was like, thank you, government. I'm sure you didn't do it for this reason, but this is really good for the church. This is really good for friendships, because our home group has gone from 9 or 10 down to 6. And anything I was doing has gone down to 6. So I've had better conversations. Rule of 1, I am loving so much. So I set up a river swimming club in March, and we've now got about 13 people in it. And we obviously used to swim together, and then we swam in groups of 6, and now we're swimming in 2s. I've got a doodle pole. And today I swam at 4 and just had the most delightful conversation with someone. So I think it's like seeing what God is doing and seeing that he is much weightier than any of our problems. And in that, we can seek opportunities to love people. So I'm embracing the smallness of life, maybe feeling a bit awkward. I wouldn't always do these one-to-ones so much, but I'm embracing it and enjoying it. Yeah.
I think that's been one of the biggest challenges that I've found in the last couple of years of the ministry that I do, that just shifting this idea of hospitality in a culture that's kind of not really good at it. Like there's an aspect of hospitality that we are good at in Britain, and that's mainly the sort of come dine with me, where let's put on a show, put on our best tablecloth and best cooking, and it's almost a show with it. And I think the challenge that I've found is actually Christian hospitality is more than that. It's being aware of your neighbor and their needs, and being sort of front-footed, not necessarily extroverted, but just like being open to say hello, even just knocking on the door. Are you okay? How are you doing? At a socially distanced distance at the moment, but that challenge of Christian hospitality that opens up your life to others, to offer that community, is in itself. And I like what you said, that in itself is an apologetic and an evangelistic moment, because it breaks an aspect of culture that people don't realize that they're looking to go beyond. I think, well, they do now. I know I've talked to my neighbour quite a bit now, and he's just recognising how much this lockdown has changed him from being quite a confident, extroverted person. Him now being in the sort of vulnerable category, he's really quite worried. So, so it's very much that kind of how do we challenge the church to be? It doesn't take a huge amount of creativity, but have you had much pushback on that kind of hospitality front? Are you finding people are going, that's too hard for me? How are you finding the interaction with your church on these ideas, and how much effort are you finding to get people moving on these things?
Yeah, I mean, I love the verses in 1 Thessalonians 2. So it says, we cared for you because we loved you so much. We were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well. And that is really moving for me. And like I said earlier, it just takes time sometimes. And we've got to remain really firm about what we believe, like the parable of the sower, what do you actually believe about evangelism? So our neighbour, we've been here 5 years. We've not done the best job at getting to know them. We've said hello over the fence. We went round for dinner early on. But we've been their neighbour. We've been kind and friendly where we can. And I think it's important to remember that God is at work in his world, and we're weak. And one of the major jobs in evangelism is praying and seeing what God does. And we were so encouraged about 6 weeks ago. We were outside our house, and our neighbour stopped us and said, I've been feeling really low and depressed. He never talks to us like that. He's only 22. I've been feeling really low and depressed. Can I come to church with you? And we were like, why do you want to come to church with us? And he said, I want to come to church with you because in my training for the police force, all the senior, most respected officers speak openly about their faith in Jesus, and that they can only do their job because they're Christians. So he was like, I'm a trainee policeman. I need to know about this because they're really good policemen and I'm feeling really low and depressed. So he started coming to church on Zoom because that's how we did it, everything live during lockdown. And now he's come in person and he's doing a secret Bible study with my husband each week. But if you'd asked me about 8 weeks ago, was I feeling encouraged about my neighbours? I would have said no chance. I mean, I do think lockdown has broken down quite a few barriers and people are more open to chatting. But it's easy just to think, you know, everyone's fine, living their nice life with their fake turf and their new paddling pool and DIY projects. But actually, when you put yourself out there and try and organise something or just go and drop cakes at someone's door, you just realise everyone is broken at the moment and on the verge of something. So I think we've got to try and forget about ourselves. Tim Keller talks about self-forgetfulness and C.S. Lewis does, and just throw ourselves out there, loving people and see what God does through that, because our experience has just been really positive in these last few months.
Yeah, I found I had a bit of an interesting experience of my street. We moved fairly recently to a place where we don't have much footfall, whereas before we were really close to our neighbours and a really good community. And we've managed to set up a WhatsApp fairly early in the first lockdown. And I just put on one of our first live streams, which probably is a bit embarrassing now. It's just like if you need some hope, and I'm involved with this church. And it did kind of backfire because there's also seems to be someone with a few issues who doesn't really like Christianity. And let's say I had an interesting interaction on my front door, but I think that was more mental health stuff than anything else. But people know we're Christian. It's there. The worst that could happen is they say no, and we just had one experience where I talked to my neighbour about it, and actually he's had issues with the same person, not because of anything Christian, but just for various issues. So in terms of the relational aspect, most people are kind of like, that's cool. You might not get that much back. You might, and that's the key. You might get what you do get back is often actually more encouraging than you might realise. But it does take, for some reason, it does like that heart's pounding. It's just a WhatsApp message. Why is this such a big deal?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, I think it is though, isn't it? Like with my friend that was dying, I thought she had died a week before she did, and I tried to chat to her loads, and I was like, please God, just let her live one more night, and I'm going to send her a message. So I sent her a 60-second WhatsApp message, and she didn't reply until the next day. And then she was like, no doom and gloom. I've not gone yet. And I was just like, whoa, what a response. I just like shared the gospel. This is crazy. But then when we did get to chat a week later, she was talking about loads of random stuff. And I said, look, you've got to stop talking. I've got to talk to you about something. And I made her listen to me. And at the end, she said, Nay, I believe everything you've said. And I'd been talking about the resurrection. And I just think, yeah, there is a boldness at that point. But by not sharing it with people, we're denying them the opportunity to actually choose for themselves. By us not telling them, we're making up their minds that they don't want to know. And that's just ridiculous. Like, we want to just put it on a plate, give people an opportunity to choose for themselves. If they say no, that's fine. I will still be their friend, of course. But yeah, I just don't think we should make up people's minds for them. And we've been pleasantly surprised. Like, why should we be surprised that people want to find life and hope in the darkness and the mess that we've got right now? Right at the start of lockdown, I just thought I want to do something. So we got our 10-minute evangelistic video from church. Our pastor's amazing, Sanjay Rajo. And I set up a Facebook watch party on my own. And I said to all my friends, come at 8 o'clock on Sunday. And I made a mistake. I hadn't downloaded it properly. So then I was like, come on Monday at 8 o'clock instead. And 3 friends turned up to this Facebook watch party. It was so simple to run. One was a friend I met on a campsite. She lived in Blackpool and we met in France. Another was John's PhD student. And then the third was my neighbour. So like completely random selection. And we were listening to this evangelistic Easter talk and it was amazing. And at one point, Sanjay said, do you believe that Jesus can raise people from the dead? Put your answers in. Again, it was a Zoom chat, so you were meant to actually put your answers in.
Wow.
We were watching the recording. So my neighbour was like, where do I put the effing answers in? And I was like, that was a Zoom call, just write in Facebook. So she wrote, maybe. And then 2 minutes later, she put, Nate, if God can raise people from the dead, why are my dad, sister and brother still dead? And I was just like, whoa, that's such a question. Can we talk later on Zoom? So we then kept on watching, and she'd obviously gone to the loo because she came back and she's like, I missed the prayer. I missed the beep, beep, beep prayer. Can you rewind? So I had to rewind this like live video. But then we went on to Zoom for an hour and a half, and we talked about her dad and her family and how sad that was. And she said to me, Nate, if you can show me that God is a better father than my dad, who I really love, then I'll listen to you. And I was like, oh my word, he is like the best father you can ever imagine. I said, like, can I read you a story from Luke 15 about this incredible father? He's so much better than your dad. And she literally shouted down Zoom, Nay, read me the Bible, read me the Bible. So I was there on Zoom, like reading Luke 15, and then put my mask on and gloves on and walked around and dropped off Luke's gospel at her house. But it's just, there are so many opportunities to be bold and courageous. And I don't think I've got any friends that have said, I don't want to be your friend anymore because of what you're saying. I mean, even last week, someone wrote to me and said, I'd asked her to design a nativity trail. She wrote and said, Nay, I can't possibly do this. I'm an atheist. And I was like, no problem. My family are atheists. I totally understand. I'll get you to do the Santa box trail instead. Like, it's totally fine for people to have an opinion, isn't it? Yeah. And I'll stop waffling.
No,
that's good.
It's not waffle. It's not
That's
waffle.
so good.
It's really interesting, and it's encouraging. I need a bit of encouragement, so it's nice to hear that kind of stuff. It's COVID's been really it's been an interesting time. That's an understatement, isn't it?
Yeah, that's good.
But it has. I mean, some things we've done. So I bought like several copies of John Lennox's book on like coronavirus and suffering and God. And what we did, I've got millions of books, and my wife's always telling me to get rid of them, which I refuse. But a point of weakness, I collected some and put them in a box. So what we did, we put those books out with loads of other books I had, and we just put a box out every day saying, look, we're at 53, like, we really love you to have these books. Please take one. You don't need to give anything. And it was lovely. And every day, like, we'd be watching the window, and the kids would be like, look, Dad, they're taking another book. They're taking another book. And they'd like be flicking it through. It's like, has he got one of the John Lennox ones? And we'd be like excited when they take one of the books. And it's really nice. And you sort of people like looking around, like, where are these people? What are they? And that was really nice. And I had a lady walk past last week, and she said, "Oh, are you the people that left the books out?" She said, "I took some of those books. They really, really helped me during lockdown." And it was quite lucky because my 3-year-old talks to everyone, and he, like me, lacks some. He can't always identify sort of social cues, so he just talks to people, and there's people are wanting to get away, but he just keeps talking to them. So we've made a lot of that can be quite helpful. But
evangelist.
Yeah, he is. He loves it. He's like, son, Hector, they want to get away. Let them go. And he's like, do you know, I have lips and I don't have a beard. I'm like, thanks, Hector. I'm not sure they wanted to know that. But he's an actual evangelist. He loves it. But that was something that was great because we didn't know what to do. You know, at that time, like, you're locked in your house. I was like, what can we do? Well, books. You know, people will read, and people are still going out walking. And I know that I had some other friends talking about that they then did that with the John Lennox book and stuff as well. And I think that was quite a helpful resource to have to hand, and led to some give those books to our neighbours and stuff as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've got a friend, Rosie O'Donnell, and she put a box every day on lockdown at the end of her driveway, and it said something like best-selling book ever, take one for free. And she just had the best conversations because you can shout at people from your windows, and I'm good old Natter. yeah, I think there's so many opportunities to do this kind of thing. The houses of light, friends of mine just decorated their houses with big fairy lights. They didn't do a trail, but they gave out these beautiful packs and hundreds were given away. And it was just so simple. So maybe God's doing something and stirring us all up and giving us opportunities to talk to our friends and being a bit more bold and courageous. And I just think it's so good. Like, if people hadn't done that for me, I would never have been a Christian. And so it's just trying to be kind to other people rather than just thinking about yourself.
Yeah.
We've just noticed that the program has been busy asking some questions. So just on this topic of evangelism, I guess we're kind of talking, I'll just put it on the screen. So if Christianity is decreasing, like where does evangelism come into play? How important is it when the numbers are not on your side? I've got a few thoughts on that program, but Nay, do you have any initial thoughts?
Well, why don't you go first? I quite like to hear what you've got to say.
Yeah, no, that's cool. So I think the numbers are never on our side as Christians. I think we've kind of been lulled into a false sense of security with the fact that we are in a majority in the West. We take for granted that our society is very much it's built on Christian foundations, whether people recognize that or not. I'm very grateful for books like Tom Holland's Dominion to point out that fact. But yeah, so evangelism, I think we like to think it's a numbers game, but I don't think it ever is. And I think even just this conversation that we're having is actually the most powerful moments of evangelism are often just the 1-to-1, the 1-to-5, if you can. And for me, I think that's also been where I've been shifting my attention in church, like the small groups aspect is the lifeblood of the church in lockdown, because you don't connect over a YouTube screen. Like there's just no, we try to make it fellowship as best we can, but there isn't. And people watching at different times, and yeah, you get a little bit of a sense of worship and something has happened. But in terms of evangelism, you can invite your friends a bit, but if it's not a specifically evangelistic Sunday, then there's not really much there. So I think with evangelism matters probably more now than ever. I think with this opportunity, yeah, sure, Christianity is decreasing in the sense of cultural Christianity. People going to church because they feel like they have to, and that's what people do. But I see that, as you've been talking there as well, I think probably agree, is that this is a great opportunity for the church, for Christianity to show, or do we actually have hope, or is it just empty words and wooden uncomfortable benches on a Sunday? Thoughts?
I think so public evangelism has breadth but not depth, and personal evangelism, seeker Bible study evangelism, has depth but not breadth. And so when you combine the two, I think it has a powerful impact on a community. And I just think we've forgotten public evangelism in churches. We don't know how to do it in a winsome, warm, compelling way. But at that point, you can reach a whole load of people. And so the numbers thing doesn't matter so much. So we ran some brilliant events in lockdown. One of them was called Jesus, Racism and Me. And it was, then there's another one called Justice, Dignity and Jesus. And that was all about the foundation of justice and dignity. We had some incredible women on the panel, and it was an evangelistic event about justice and dignity. And, you know, we're at 1,000 views. And this is just little old Naomi Dawson on her personal YouTube that she thought would be a bit of fun to set up in lockdown. So that's had a huge reach. And I know that people have watched it for the entire time because the stats tell me, but it doesn't have the depth that maybe a 1-to-1 would have with somebody. But yeah, I just think we never do evangelism because the numbers are on our side, do we? That's just like not in the equation. It's about being a farmer that liberally spreads the word across the field as much as we possibly can. But yeah, I think we have forgotten how to go broad and deep at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, the numbers have been much worse. I mean, we originally started with 12 and went down to 11. So, things it could always be much worse. Yeah,
you are the pessimist. I love that. That's so good. Cool. There's probably a little bit, as I'm interested in and also involved in student ministry and an international aspect to it. One of the questions that I think is quite interesting, I'll be interested in your answer as well, is what are the most, maybe even aside from pandemic, which I think has some interesting challenges, what are you finding? Well, pandemic seems to be with us for a little while. So what is the most challenging aspect at the moment that you're finding, and has that changed?
Yeah, I mean, it's massively shifted, hasn't it? I can't even imagine being a student right now. So there's just so many challenges, and the challenges seem really different across Europe. So, some people are happy, having a great time. I'm in parties of 200 people in the halls. But others are having a really difficult time. So I think that diversity of experience is hard. Some have just gone home and quit already. I don't blame them. Others are self-isolating. I think there's challenges to do with, joining a local church, finding out where the Christian Union is. Everything that used to be hard is just now exasperated. Saying that, I do think students, certainly in Southampton, are finding church a whole lot quicker and making it their home because it's been in person. That might change now. We're going back to online. But yeah, there's huge challenges of mental health. Like the universities have thought about hybrid teaching and blended learning, but completely forgotten about the community aspect of university. And so that's gone. And that's like, mental health is so fragile in that age group anyway, that it's going to be a disaster. So yeah, and you hope Christmas isn't cancelled for them, that they can get back in time. I just think the challenges, they've shifted so much for us as a movement, even financial challenges of supporters that have stopped supporting, and can we even afford to pay our staff across Europe, those kind of things. And probably the apologetic questions are changing as well. Not quite sure on that yet, what that looks like, but yeah, it almost feels like it's an entire challenge right now. I think there's some trends that we've been seeing in mission. So evangelism that's going well on campuses is more collaborative. So the Scottish Christian Union's decided to get together. Every single university in Scotland did a joint mission online, and that was phenomenal. I think there's a trend in online work having a far greater reach than ever before. So particularly like making it more accessible for lots of different people that could never come to events. So, I've heard of Muslim women that desperately wanted to go to Alpha courses, but not allowed to go out of the house. Now they're secretly attending Alpha via their laptop. So I think where there's challenges, there are these huge opportunities for creativity, greater reach, adaptability, greater opportunity for community. But yeah, I feel sorry for university staff. I feel sorry for everyone. It's just a nightmare, isn't it?
I've got a quick question. I was just thinking while you were speaking. You were in the UK apologetics group, right? UK apologetics event. Yeah. So I set that up with Callum Miller about, must be 8 or 9 years ago now. So we got like sort of maybe just over 4,000 people on there. And I always think that it doesn't really get used as well as it could, as I kind of envisioned. And I've had much less time on Facebook since I've had kids and things like that, and other work commitments. But I was wondering, like, how could we better use that as a resource, in terms of, like, we got over 4,000 Christians on there, and I'm like you in the sense I have lots of ideas, except my ideas are not usually to do with evangelism; they're to do with other things, which is not great for evangelism. So I would be really interested to know, like, how could I make better use of that community for evangelism?
Yeah, I think Facebook is really interesting. So if you've not looked at Nonna Jones, she's head of faith for Facebook, and she's really interesting. So when they kind of hit their mark, I can't remember the figure, but they hit this mark of like, you know, a quarter of the world's population. At that point, they realized they didn't need just to reach out to people. They needed to connect people better. So they appointed Nonna Jones head of faith for Facebook. So she does a lot of work that is specifically for how you use Facebook for faith groups. And I think it's really interesting how it's becoming more intuitive for faith groups. So like within a group, you can have a mentoring scheme. You've got your page, which is your front window. You've got your group, which is closed. You've got these rooms that you open up within the groups where you can have conversations. And I think there's just some basic things about how you get a Facebook group alive. So you need to regularly post content. You need to post content where people are going to engage back with you. You need to have on average 5 or 6 people that are regularly responding to every post to build a sense of community. And you need to try and live stream into that group as much as possible to create momentum. And I've noticed a big difference when you do like a closed Zoom call or a YouTube thing, or you post right into Facebook. And I love posting to Facebook because it just pops up on people's notifications and they're like, oh, I just happened to watch an hour of you talking there. I didn't plan to. So I think you got to look at what they're doing in Facebook for you and look at all the new apps that Nonna is creating, and then get a team of people that will work for you. So they've got nice little titles like I become chief admin, or like best ideas person, or best storyteller, or best visual storyteller. That was my favorite. So you get this little shield, like work out all those little things that you could become, and then find somebody within the group and just appoint them and say, you know, for a month, you're going to be our creative storyteller. So every week post a story and get a conversation going. So that we've got this Passion for Evangelism Facebook group, and that's what we do. We post content regularly. We live stream into the page to get people engaged. If we've ever got an event, we open up a room and we get people praying for the event. I mean, I'm really interested in like where you meet online, because I think a venue is a nudge and it's a script to the event that you're going to have. And what we've done with online church is we've just gone for ease, and we've gone for streaming on YouTube. And church has never been a transmission of a message. It's the gathering of God's people. And so I think if we stop and pause and think about our values, and then look at how amazing technology is, and work out which technology best enhances our values of our meeting, it's just quite exciting where we could go. I mean, I'm really positive about online church for many reasons. But the difference, so through lockdown, I ran this wine and chat 7:30 every Thursday for mums in year 1. And we did it on Zoom, and the time lag on Zoom was just a bit awkward, and the numbers went down, few issues with a few people getting too drunk. So it stopped. And then I said, why don't we start it as a Facebook room within our group where we already exist? Like, where do people inhabit? And instantly the numbers went up again. And Facebook doesn't have that time lag. 2 or 3 people can natter at once. And it was just really lovely for us as a group. So I just think we've got to think a whole lot more about where we are having our meetings and what does it say about the meeting just by what platform we're choosing. I don't know if that answers your question. But yeah, I love Facebook groups. Just get a strategy. I mean, I don't mind sending a strategy afterwards.
Yeah, no, I mean, it'd be good to chat, because I mean, I'd love it to be, I know, Phil, you do a lot more on there now than I have for a while. And I've been just, Naomi, if it's possible for you to even, stream what you're doing, whether that can also go on our page as well, something like that would be. I just think anything, if there's people actively doing stuff, that's great to share that content.
Have you shared this into the group tonight?
So yeah, we've got the YouTube clip in, but the issue with StreamYard is it can only if it's free, which we are. If you want to support this work, anyone watching, feel free.
Come on, I'll pay for it for myself. It's like 25 quid a month. So that's the cool thing. You pay for it, and you give it to all your friends generously, and they love you.
Yeah.
You could put it into Facebook, and then it just goes in multiple places. That's cool.
Right.
So that's the dream. That's where we're headed with this.
Oh, come on. Right, everyone, can you please support Critical Witness? This is ridiculous. If 5 people give 5 quid a month, they can then show on Facebook, and they'll get loads more people. Please, will you give tonight to Critical Witness? These guys are great. I don't even know them, and I think they're great.
Amazing. Thanks. You can come again, mate. Like,
Thanks, anytime.
I didn't realise you could do that. I didn't realise you could do that. Stream on multiple
that's the dream.
platforms.
Join us next week. I mean, the other thing is you could just use my StreamYard if you want, because I've got it. But next week we're doing Where's God in the COVID World on YouTube, on Facebook. And the thing is, if you just do Zoom to Facebook Live, not everyone's got Facebook. But between Facebook and YouTube, everyone's got that.
Cover a lot.
Yeah. Well, that's really encouraging, because I think maybe doing live events on there, because we've got so many interesting people on there as well. We could just do next Wednesday, if you got half an hour to do a talk and half an hour Q&A on, suffering, coronavirus and God or something like that, would be a really interesting thing we could do. And it's made me think like how maybe that's one thing we could do to utilize, even have like half an hour Q&A or something like that, or because it definitely doesn't get utilized as much as it could. And my issue is lack of ideas and time. We used to have a really active admin group, and it's kind of just still
ticking along. It is very much a community of just posting articles at the moment. And links. So that's some really good ideas there. Just aware that our audience, we have a Facebook group. You can find it attached to our Facebook page, UK Apologetics and Evangelism. We tend to try and keep it to people in the UK, just to keep it culturally relevant, really. There's a lot of groups that are very much get swamped by Americanisms very quickly. And nothing
we
against
do try
Americans,
and let people, sometimes we let people in from the Commonwealth. But it's actually spawned off. There's a really active, so my friend Bruce Blackshaw, he moved back to Australia last year. He set up a couple of years ago Australian apologetics and evangelism, the same group, and they've got like 1,500, 2,000 people there, and that's really big impact. It's really interesting to see what they're doing, and a really active group. So it's nice how they sort of spread. But I just think I'd love to, listening to you, just to see, it's giving me some really helpful ideas about how it could be utilized better. Because having 4,000 people, that's not a small amount of people, an insignificant number of people. So
I guess you just want a clear vision as well. Like, what is the vision of the group? And then what we do as well every Sunday night, I don't know what happens on Sunday nights, but we welcome new people into PFE, into the group, and we write this new little welcome post, and we put, tell us about yourself. We want to know why you joined the group, and we want to know a bit about how you get involved in evangelism. And that's just really lovely. And then other people will be like, oh, hi, welcome, Beth from Surrey. You have a nice little chit chat and you get to know each other. So I just think if you kind of imagine it as like your party, your people, like how are you going to host that well? How are you going to be a really good host in that event or in that group?
Maybe after this, maybe you have to give us some training one evening on how to do all this stuff. You're just saying stuff like, I don't even know how to do that.
Actually, so I've written a blog post called The Art of Gathering Online. I did a lot in lockdown with churches online and charities online, and it's all about how you gather online and how you gather communicates something of your message, and that communicates something of the God you believe in. And I think it's really important, actually. So read my blog post.
There's a lot of good stuff that can apply to even church groups, church Facebook groups. So hopefully those listening can apply some of the things that they've heard, and that'll be really useful stuff. And go to Nay's blog. What was the website again?
naydawson.com. It's quite simple.
There we go, naydawson.com. There we go. We've got another question on the screen. Do you ever get the time to study apologetics?
That's a great question. So I think probably the best time for me to study is when I'm getting ready to speak. So if I'm speaking at an events week or at an event, then that's a really good time to prepare. So I did a talk maybe 5 weeks ago on Where is God in a COVID World? And it's just really great to read the latest John Lennox book, to read some Tim Keller stuff. So I'm the kind of person that struggles to sit down for hours on end and read. I find it much easier to read if I've got a purpose. And also I really love Audible, and I do a lot of listening to Audible whilst walking or cycling. My husband and I did a course at Wycliffe a decade or so ago on apologetics, and that was fantastic. when I worked for UCCF, we had a study program for all the staff that we did every month. So I think it's really important to keep reading as much as you possibly can. But what I find important as a mum with kids and an active life, it's got to work with my life so that I'm learning head knowledge and then being transformed in my heart. So when I'm speaking, I'm hopefully inviting people to come and know the God that I love and worship rather than just trying to persuade people. But yeah, I was hoping maybe in this autumn I might do some more study with Wycliffe, but that's just not happened. I need to make some time for it. So I would like to do that more. But I think just put yourself in for some evangelistic talks and you'll find you end up reading a couple of books in preparation, which is really helpful.
Yeah. I think it's putting yourself forward, isn't it? Some of it, you just got to just take that step. And there's loads of things around that help engage that step. So things like Alpha courses, the Bible course, one-to-one Bible studies. It's the word one-to-one that I recommend. And it's just asking your friend, do you want to read the Bible with me? And I think we've had this conversation a little bit on this channel. I don't know if you've seen it, but we've got we've had this conversation of where does apologetics fit within evangelism. And I find with apologetics we can sometimes get caught up with, I have to have the right answer. I have to have the answer before I can speak, and I have to have the right answer before I can engage with someone who might be critical of Christianity. And I think that's sometimes we end up with apologetics being the excuse for not doing evangelism because I don't know enough. And I think one of the sort of breaking books for me a while ago, I think it was actually Dan who recommended it, but it's a book named Questioning Evangelism by Randy Newman.
Yeah.
That actually wasn't me.
It wasn't you? Oh, there you go. It was someone else who reads a lot of books then. But a recommend that idea that actually I can ask questions before giving answers. I can understand the person first before. Sure, everyone needs Jesus, but going into a question saying going into a conversation saying I know what you need before you even know the person is not just arrogant, but it's not going to win you any favors. And I think studying apologetics can be helpful, but it shouldn't hinder how ready you are to share your faith. You can share your faith no matter how studied you are.
We should all be inquisitive. Like I always think that most people are always going to have similar sort of questions to what you have. We're all a lot of us have similar experiences to some extent. And so if you're naturally sort of think, what answer do I find satisfying to the problem of evil and suffering? What answer do I find satisfying about Christianity and history and crusades and stuff like that? So I often sort of find that they're the most likely questions to pop up, the ones that you find difficult or interesting, if you've tried to think about as a Christian or before you were a Christian. And I think trying to anticipate every possible question, like what if they ask about the A and B theory of time, with a cosmological argument, and I don't know, what about now there's a C, this other thing, and you think if you start doing that, you'll never do evangelism because it's impossible to know all that stuff. And like you were saying, like we follow the master questioner. Jesus was so great at asking questions, and not seeing that as a tactic for evangelism, but genuinely being interested. Like, what do you think? Like, someone asked about suffering. It's like, well, how do you understand suffering? From your worldview, like, why do you not find it satisfying? Or and that takes the pressure off you having to know everything. I think I've gone through periods like that where I used to read apologetics books all the time and just feeling just overburdened of my inadequacy to understand everything and to remember everything. I could understand something, but then to remember it, 3 years later, when the one person out of the thousands I've spoken to asked that question, is just an unnecessary burden. I think, like you, just love people and just be genuinely interested in them, and
Yeah, I was interested to hear Professor John Lennox speak in December, and he was talking about how he asks people questions and he keeps on asking them questions until they ask him a question back. And he's one of the cleverest men around. He could vomit the gospel out on anyone and give a good answer for anything, couldn't he? But he chooses instead to ask questions until they ask a question back. And I think that is a fantastic principle. And I love that book by Randy Newman. I read it years ago and I found it so helpful. And I just love it when it encourages you to look at how Jesus engages and interacts with people and his use of story. And that is just so amazing, because stories are such a phenomenal way of communicating truth to people so that it's felt and it impacts them. And it leaves them longing for more. It leaves them curious. And I love the way Jesus tells these stories, ask questions which leave people really deeply impacted, so much more than just a kind of sermon at them. And I think there's a lot to learn from that book, actually. And we've seen that with the Uncover studies, which are a bit like the Word one-to-one, just encouraging your friends to look at the person of Jesus, how he interacts with other people, and inviting them to come and meet him. Those stories are just incredible. And when you really live them and know them, and then you can just share them with your friends, they're life-changing. And, I think this is a time for Seeker Bible studies, actually, because the one thing you can do is meet one-to-one in most places still. You can go for a walk, you can chat. And I think looking at Seeker Bible studies, they're best done in small groups. And so this is the moment. So tomorrow, actually, we're hosting a really big event with IFES online with Rebecca Manley-Pippett speaking. And my team's hosting it. And it's called For Such a Time as This, Introducing Your Friends to Jesus. And I think this is the moment for Seeker Bible studies. So if you've not ever done one, do it, because your heart will be warmed about Jesus. You'll learn stuff from your friends. Those stories that you're talking about and asking questions, it is really freeing. And I've been in so many conversations where people are just trying to shove you in a corner with their intellectual knowledge. And looking back now, that's all they were trying to do. And I think loving people, saying, I'll come back with an answer, it's just a really good approach to difficult questions.
It's I think one of the things I think it will be interesting to be a good sort of segue into women evangelists. There's always this undercurrent with men, that when you have two people that disagree about something, especially when they're particularly passionate, the end goal is very rarely truth. The goal is usually winning or being perceived to have won the discussion that's really an argument. It's always and there's something about that it's often the natural way that those conversations develop, and between men, and I'm sure there's all sorts of reasons for that, and especially people who are really interested in apologetics. It like I said before, it becomes sort of this intellectual jousting contest rather than the pursuit of truth or a conversation that is motivated by love for that person and wanting to share the gospel with them. And it can be more about being perceived as having won the argument. They couldn't respond to my argument from the kalam or the ontological argument. And I would say in my experience, I've never seen women when they in those kinds of conversations it ever looking like that. It never feels to me that it's this intellectual jousting. It's always it's different. I don't want to characterize because it's all anecdotal, but it never looks like that. And there's just something about, again, on average, anecdotally, that you see just men who like apologetics just always looks different. So I always think, what can I learn from women? Like, what can people listening learn from women about evangelism? Because as I said before we started, I always think just women are often better evangelists in my experience in many ways. I think there's men who are great evangelists at the public, and there aren't, not that trying to tie myself in knots here, not that there are women who are not great public evangelists, but the women that people are not necessarily in the public eye, women seem to just thrive in that environment, and I'd love to know what I can learn from yourself and women in general, maybe, about doing evangelism in a more fruitful and way, really.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. So I set up Passion for Evangelism a couple of years ago, and really it came out of time working with UCCF and just looking around the university missions and seeing that not many women at that point were involved in speaking and communicating publicly. And I wanted to do something about it. I wanted to bring some change. So we set up a conference called Passion for Evangelism, and women brought a really simple, short 10-minute passion talk. So based on a passion and how that relates to your faith. So for me, I talked about river swimming and how that related to my faith. And we intentionally chose topics like that to make it just that bit nicer getting into doing talks. And 55 women came, and then we set up the Facebook group, and it's grown from there. There's about 600 women now in the group. We had a conference this year, March the 20th, just as the travel ban came in. We went from an in-person conference to an online conference in 3 days. And it was phenomenal because women from around the world joined us, whereas we just had UK women when it was in person. So there's a lot to learn from men, and there's a lot to learn from women. And I think one thing we're really committed in PFE is working together for the gospel. And actually what we want to do is show a better story than the one that has been told. So Passion for Evangelism is not about saying that we don't need men. It's not saying that women are better than men. What we want to do is show what restored sibling relationship looks like. And we want to do that in mission, so that when I do a talk, I speak well of men and I respect them. And maybe on a platform, I'll speak together with a man, or in a Q&A, we'll do Q&A together. But I think our culture has this inadequate and over-sexualized word around men and women. And we need to stand against that by not allowing it to drive us apart. So within Passion for Evangelism, that's what we're trying to do. Yes, it's like a greenhouse trying to raise up women, but the end goal is to go out and serve with men. And as we serve together, men and women together, we want to point to the kind of God that we know and worship, who can actually help men and women relate to each other. So I think I've got a lot to learn from you two and from others. I mean, I feel desperately passionate that there are some fantastic women out there who are too underconfident and think it's too presumptuous to offer themselves for anything. So I did this survey amongst student workers, and I've been reading some really helpful books that triggered my mind quite a lot. And I was looking at the kind of question, how likely are you to offer yourself for a role or a job that you'd really like to do? And the contrast between men and women was huge. So when men apply for a job, when women apply for a job, they look at the kind of essentials and desirables, and only if they can do 100% of them, they apply for the job. When men apply for a job, guess how many of the essentials they need to be able to do before they apply for it? Come on, boys.
Probably 50%. Maybe.
Yeah, 3.
Wow.
If they can do the top 3, they'll apply for the job. And I think what that shows, so that's from the Confidence Code, a phenomenal book about confidence in women. It just shows that women are not so good at offering themselves for stuff. And so, a man will look in a mirror and see a senator or a president. A woman will look in the mirror and just think it's too presumptuous to think I could be anything. And so we've got a really big problem because, yes, women are fantastic evangelists. They're fantastic storytellers. Some of them can be fantastic apologists, like Emil Ewing, which is in the comments. Thank you very much, programmer. But I just think they're not being encouraged and supported in a way that they need to be in order to get going. So within Passion for Evangelism, we've got a mentoring scheme called the Greenhouse. And I love gardening, so it was an apt name. We ran it last term for the first ever time. We had 8 women join us. And each of the women did an evangelistic blog, an evangelistic Instagram video, and an evangelistic talk. And they got feedback on all of those, and we published all of them. And then we thought, because we're in a pandemic, let's just chill out a bit. So we're just doing a greenhouse blog this term, and it launched on Monday. And we've got 52 women that are in our mentoring scheme. And for 8 weeks, they're going to be mentored. They're going to write an evangelistic blog. Philippa Wilson, who's awesome, you should all follow her. Get her on here, actually, she's amazing. She's the writer and evangelist. She's doing our training. And I just think what we've done is we've just put the ask out there, who wants to be in this? They're all writing to me saying, no, I don't think I'm good enough. And I'm like, look, are you a woman? Do you love evangelism? You're in, it's fine. I just think there's a whole lot of work to be done on underconfident men and definitely women.
That's cool. That's amazing. That's really important work you're doing. I'm amazed. That's great. And we'll have to make sure. We've got a lot of women in the group. I mean, I think over 30% of the members of the group are women. So that's a lot.
Yeah, but remember, like, population of women, and remember the percentage of women in the church, right? Did you not see Rebecca McGaughlin's post the other day?
No.
I didn't see that one. No.
Have a look at this really good post about the percentage of women in the church, like 70%, and the role of women in. So, like,
that's always been the case.
But like 30 is good, but why is it not 70? So that's interesting.
Well,
and I think it's probably the nature of the group.
A reason would be because it was
I don't mean to be rude. It's a great group. It's a great group.
No. It is what you're right. And I think the reason for that is because it was originally apologetics. That just by nature of its argumentative nature draws men rather than women, because just on average, men and women, we're allowed to say men and women are different. We have different, personality traits. Look at the big five, there's different distributions and things like that. We are different, but we're more in common than we're different. But on an average, men tend to be the ones that are drawn towards apologetics. And I think that's why it was originally so skewed, and I think that's been changing. I think there are a lot more. I think most people who apply to join us, since we added evangelism into it, I'm not sure if that is the reason why, but that seems to be we end up with more women. So 30%. You're right. It should be like 70-30 for women. In terms of So I mean, the reason I brought that up, you're right to notice that. But why I brought that up is that actually there's a lot of women in that group who would benefit from what you're doing, because I think what tends to happen sometimes in the group is you do get those dominant men who are just maybe unintentionally rude and blunt. And I think that often more women read posts but don't engage. You very rarely have. We had who did we have on a couple of weeks ago?
Claire Williams.
Claire Williams. Again, she had a thread on there about racism, and it got really quite pointed, and she was, attacked in a way. I mean, probably maybe the person didn't mean to do that, but and it was. I think a lot of people see that, and it puts them off posting. So I think that the kind of training you're offering and what you're doing in the group would be something I'd love to promote in there and get, a lot of women might not know about your group and what you're offering. So maybe we'll definitely try and put some posts on there, and please always feel free to post in there as well about what you're doing, because that would be great.
And I mean, I do think men and women, I mean, Claire is amazing. She was on one of our panels. Men and women are so different, and within that we're also different. But I think what happens within the Passion for Evangelism group is just really interesting. So we have like group rules. You set them when people come in. And we encourage people to post up if they're giving an evangelistic talk. And then what women just naturally do is they're like, go for it, Nay, you can do it, praying for you. Let us know how it goes. And it's just this like huge encouragement. But I notice when I try and give that encouragement to men, they're like, no, you're being sarcastic. What's happening? And I'm like, no, I'm just genuinely like really excited. And so I think it's back to kind of basic men and women just relating to each other, and certainly having group rules in a group like that, the way you behave well. But I just think there's a brilliant article by Eric Schumacher. We totally love him in PFE. Him and Elise Fitzpatrick wrote Worthy. It's a book every Christian leader should read. And he's written a small snippet on Gospel Coalition called 21 Places, women emerge front and center in Scripture's storyline. And it's just so encouraging to see the role of women through Scripture. You know, the first eyewitnesses, women. Mm-hmm. Why is it we've got this wrong view of apologetics, that it's a man's game? Mm. And certainly I felt that myself, even though I've got fantastic friends that are men. You look at how Jesus treats women and the kind of way he uses them and respects them, and they're key witnesses to him. Even in that day, what on earth has gone wrong? Like, how many female public evangelists can you count on one hand? It's like, it's Amy, our good friend Amy. And that's it. Becky. And I just feel, Becky, so sad. I mean, Ocker are fantastic. Sharon Dirk, speaking tomorrow in Southampton, they're great. But that's because Amy is intentionally mentoring women and believing in them. And like, I think with women, you probably need to invite them to do something and give them feedback and train them. And a lot of people have said, oh, no, we're not going to ask you because you're busy or you've had children. It's like, give me a chance to say yes or no. Don't kind of protect me. So we in Passion for Evangelism, we read a book every term, and then we have a book club, and we often invite the author to come and we meet the author. It's just amazing. It's such a privilege. Awesome. And we had Amy Bird back on. No, you can't. You're not a winner.
We're different, Dan.
You're different. We had Amy Bird's book, and we had Amy Bird come and join us just before, everything happened for her recently. And she was just phenomenal, what she was encouraging us to do. And we read her book, and it was, it was so, so good. And a lot of what we're thinking about is shaped by her, really. I don't even know where I'm going with this. Was there a question? No. But read Amy Bird.
There's just a bunch of ideas there that are really good. Just getting a book a month, inviting people. And that's kind of what we're finding in this channel, is just inviting people to have a chat, and people are responding. And I think in this moment of lockdown, people are a bit more willing to have these kind of conversations and try something a bit different. And there's been so much around. There was also that thing going around of share your story as a Christian on Facebook, and I saw a few people trying to give a 2-minute testimony on Facebook and seeing how people responded. There are more opportunities to try that out, I think, online than there probably have been, and I think it's working out how to be creative to give yourself those opportunities, and make sure you've got a couple of very close friends around you that can give you that feedback and be honest with you, and in both building you up and also going, you could probably have dropped this, that, and the other, and maybe added this, and that feedback afterwards.
Totally. So we're going to, in the spring, our next greenhouse is going to be on Instagram 60-second videos. So for a while, we did these 60-second stories of hope on Instagram every Saturday morning. A different woman did it every Saturday. And Inonge Saluka, who you should get on this. Cool.
Oh, I've just started following her, actually. Yeah.
She's amazing. She is going to be our trainer for that one. So again, we'll open it up. Women only, I'm afraid, can come, and you'll get trained in how to do an Instagram 60-second video by her, and we'll have feedback, and it'll be brilliant. The other day, I went and got coffee, and it was literally the other day, so it was in lockdown, and the guy was doing really lovely coffee art. So I was like, do you mind if I just video this for my husband? And then I thought, I'll just put it on Instagram, see what happens. 300 people viewed it really quickly. And it's just crazy. People watch my Instagram video of coffee art. And if I was thoughtful and I took a bit of time, I could easily do a little message. People will listen. I mean, basically there's a huge open door for anyone right now on social media. And I think particularly for women, so many of us are in churches where there's no platform to speak. And we're not encouraged to speak, even evangelistically, which, not many people have an issue with women speaking evangelistically, but it doesn't happen for some reason. But social media is this open door to your friends, and you can get on, and maybe you need a bit of courage and boldness. Come and find us in PFE, or find these guys if you're a man. But I think with a bit of encouragement and help, it's amazing what you can do really for your friends.
Wow! I've got so many ideas about what to do. I want to.
Dan's just going to disappear and go onto Facebook.
Yeah. Well, I'm probably going to have a million messages from that vaccine thing in a minute, but but no, you've given me so many ideas. I'd love to, have a chat about what we can do in the group, because try and steal some of, not steal, borrow, some of your ideas and stuff. 'Cause I like the idea of, like, you know, getting people who've written books and stuff to come on and maybe do like a Facebook Live. I think they're the sort of things that would you know, help build a sort of community, and you know, get regular sort of posters and stuff back. Because I completely agree with you about having, you just need like a core of people who are all, on any post, are always engaging, offering some sort of wisdom and insight, or some
and just being nice,
common sense sometimes.
And
being nice. And being nice.
Well, and also, like, I did a lot of work on online conferences, and you're 10 times as likely to switch off in an online conference than you are in person. And so one of the implications for that and for church is you just need to be far more engaging and get people active and involved in the conversation. So, you know, 2-minute videos or 60-second videos, every 5 minutes asking a question when you're leading your service, to get people to feedback, whether that's on Facebook or Zoom. But my point is, if you were to put a poll into your group and say, you know, vote, what do you most want to have as a Facebook Live next week? What is the topic that is not being covered anywhere else? We'll do it for you. Whatever it is you choose, you can set up a poll and do that really easily. So then you get engagement, you get people interested, you get them invested, and then you stream it straight into that group and they watch it. So with this like 10-day, I don't know if I mentioned it, 10-day isolation video challenge I'm doing, I got them all to suggest which theme we should do tomorrow. So today was clowns. And I said, suggest your themes. And then I set up a poll on Slido and I was like, vote for your favourite. And it was just brilliant. They've decided as a group what theme it is tomorrow. It's going to be funny pets. Nice. All 32 families are going to submit 30-second funny pet videos. But we're just trying to build the momentum in that WhatsApp group. And that's the other thing, actually. Like, you don't want to just think about one medium. You want to work out where people are inhabiting naturally. But it maybe you go for Instagram with some WhatsApp, or, you know, there's different things that you can use to create community. And I think that's what I'm really passionate about, is building community online. That's the whole premise of what I did with Community in a Crisis, because I just think community is at a premium now.
Absolutely. So is that Community in Crisis, is that just Facebook? Was there a website with that, just to get
it was just Facebook. It was just me having a bit of fun. I kind of stopped it. Yeah, I kind of stopped it in the summer because I wasn't quite sure what was happening with church going online. So I occasionally blog about it now, and there's lots of good resources. Like, interestingly, like, everyone says that online sung worship doesn't work. And yet when you look through the Bible, in a crisis, God's people sing. It's like a biblical thing. Psalm 121, on their annual pilgrimage, in danger, facing a crisis, what do? They sing new songs of grace. Everyone's saying online worship doesn't work, and yet it does. I've seen it work, both with the Come Sing With Me with Ollie Knight, he'd be good to get on here, and with our church on Zoom doing live worship every Sunday. On my blog, the most read blog, I don't know if the numbers are good, I'm rubbish with this, but 7,537, I counted this morning, views on Katie Lewis, professional musician's blog on worship on Zoom tips and tricks. So it's the thing everybody wants to do, the thing everyone's saying doesn't work. It's because God's people need to sing in a crisis. And you look at a book like Habakkuk, and the structure is question, answer, song. We've got a problem because we're not singing. Singing's banned in churches, even when we're back in person. People are saying it doesn't work online. And yet Habakkuk tells us God's people need question, answer, song. And so my blog's full of really interesting things. Mostly it's other people I got to write for me, and I just occasionally wrote something. But yeah, have a look at my blog on Community in Crisis. There's lots of stuff there, because I think church online is here to stay, and I think it makes church so much more accessible for non-believers, for people who are housebound or chronically ill, much more accessible. So
and that's definitely something that's I'm quite aware of, is that's the side of disability and being included. And the lockdown, actually, for those who were excluded because they couldn't get to the church anyway before pandemic, suddenly everything's online. And I was trying to, I can't remember, there's someone who set up a whole online church basically because they just could not access church where they were at. and I really wish I could remember the name of it. Something like You Belong, I think. But they were saying that when lockdown was starting to ease, churches were backing off the online stuff, and they were kind of headed back to before, where they were excluded again.
I know.
I think it's so vital that churches do engage with these things and get people on it, get teams around it, because you can't backtrack on it once you've enabled people to be included. The hurt and disconnect that will cause.
I mean, there's so much on this. So we set up church on Zoom because we really believed in real-time collectiveness, the gathering of God's people. That's why I went for Zoom. It was not slick professional YouTube. It's just kind of slightly scrappy Zoom with no Zoom bombers. Our pastor, who's in his 70s, went back to the Isle of Wight to care for his parents, and they didn't have a laptop and they didn't have internet. He's our pastor, and he came to church every week on his mobile phone, phoning in on a number. So he came in basically blind because he couldn't see anyone.
Of course,
his parents hadn't gone to church, weren't Christians, became Christians in lockdown, and went to church for the first time ever via his phone on speakerphone. It was just phenomenal. He started doing Bible studies with them. They came to know Jesus. So there's this reach to people, and it's not just disabled people, but it's single parents or mums with kids, and they can only get there at 8. Like people at work who have to work on a Sunday. We've got people taking church in their phone to work, and we see the post office behind them. Like it's just so much more accessible. And I think there's something so wrong about the church. And I think lockdown has shown us where there are some huge margin areas: race, disabilities, women, which is yet to happen, I think, poverty, these huge areas where we have just forgotten, and we're not this body we thought we were. And I think it's taken isolation to show us what we were and what we're not. And I'm hoping and praying we can go back to it and be different. But the other thing that Kay Morgan-Gurr, she's brilliant. She works for Spring Harvest as disabilities advisor and writes for Guardian and places. She says that according to Lausanne, the disabled community is the most unreached people group in the world. And yet when you look at the percentage of our population, the BAME population and the disabled population are not too different in numbers. So it's the most unreached people group, a huge percentage in the UK. And online church is this fantastic opportunity. One, we could have learned from the disabled community. We could have stopped just in lockdown and said, disabled community, what have you done? You've been online for decades. Teach us. I don't think anyone stopped to ask them. I certainly didn't. But now, as we consider going forwards and thinking about evangelism, like you could have this subtitled, and it would be so much better for people that need subtitling. You could have someone signing as the fourth box on our thing, and it would be so much more accessible to that most unreached people group. So I think Kay Morgan-Gurr is someone to listen to on disabilities, evangelism, on inclusion and accessibility in the church. And Tanya Marlowe does a fantastic job with that too.
Subtitling is really interesting. We're trying live preaching again on Sunday, despite being on YouTube. We usually record so we can subtitle and then go live. But the subtitles, live subtitling, automatic subtitling, oh man, it was more distracting for everyone. It was a bit of a disaster. I think I was anchoring, and I apparently said something about a Russian communion, but I'm not sure what that is. So it's just ending up distracting people when you're in this Remembrance Sunday trying to be serious, and you got these random subtitles coming up. But someone's got to type really fast if they're going to be doing it on a live stream. I don't know.
And I just think it's just loads of people are being left out. So like looking at the blessing, which I think was an amazing song. My church were part of the blessing. But it had quite a good representation of ethnic background, mostly because of my church and their networks, because it's an international church. It wasn't signed and it wasn't subtitled. So it's just the disabled community are forgotten. And I'd love to speak out about this. And there are others that you can invite on to speak, because it's just so sad. It's like, are we really that body that it talks about in Corinthians? I just don't think we are. We're not diverse in the church. We're not inclusive for lots of different people.
And we see, oh man, there's another can of worms. Just thinking on disability and even evangelism and if you're in a charismatic church, how you engage with those who are disabled. Oh man, I'm happy to go into a little bit of this conversation if need be, but Dan, go.
No. It just reminded me of an article I read about. Was it someone with disabilities and how their experiences in the church about being viewed as not fully, you're a Christian but you're missing out on something because you have a disability, and certain churches that. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I found it a really interesting article because, again, being someone able-bodied, it's not something that crosses my mind. So it was really interesting to kind of read about their experiences of the church as someone who wasn't able-bodied, and how people engage with them in a way that made them quite uncomfortable. I don't know if you saw, was it in the Guardian or something? I can't remember where I read
see that
it.
one.
It was a while ago.
Yeah.
I'll see if I can find it.
But
I mean,
it's
sorry,
there's
so much that's been designed in a world by men for men. So Caroline Criado Perez wrote an amazing book called Invisible Women, and I actually saw it at the theatre just before lockdown. And first chapter is on toilets and how toilets across the world have been made by men for men. And, you think, oh, what's she talking about? But actually, the amount of space that men need to pee is far less than women. And yet a toilet for men is given 10 meters and a toilet for women is given 10 meters. So no wonder there's huge queues, because there's just far less space in the women's than the man's. And what difference does that really make? Well, huge amount of difference, particularly if you struggle with incontinence, or you have a secret disability to do with the toilet. Like, there's huge things where you think, oh, it's just a bit of a joke. Does it really matter that men have more space, more urinals per 10 meters than women do? But when I was reading her and thinking a lot about how cities are built. There's some brilliant stuff about Barcelona and how Barcelona has been redesigned by women for men and women. And my friend Joe Rogers said, Nate, I'm looking at projects on churches and how churches were built by men for men. And if you were to rebuild a church from scratch, how would you think about it? Again, for those, marginal minority groups. So for women, for disabled people, for race, like how do you build your church afresh, building and structures for those people? And I think that's what lockdown's done. It's stripped away absolutely everything from us, gives us a chance to stand before God and say, what do you want of your people, of your church? The building is so much less to us now than it used to be. But how can we rebuild your church? And whether that's like a physical building, but certainly structures that are not physical, I think, need to be thought about as well.
Yeah, that's huge. And being able to representation of people who perfectly capable in all other areas, but potentially can't walk or things like, how do you get them up the front, get them participating, get them engaged? And it's also training your congregation to not see them in the light that Dan was talking about, but also I just continue to hear stories of people that are prayed for like the project, and it's like, why have you offered me that but not the person that's standing next to me? Like, what that kind of interaction in churches, you might be well-meaning, but actually you've just insulted me because you just see me as someone who hasn't prayed enough. And so there's a huge amount of work that the church needs to do. It's quite growing area closer to my heart as my daughter gets older, for various reasons there. But it's huge. It's something that, and the church is made for minorities. Like, it was built on from minorities. If we go back to the early church, and the significant history seems to be that it was built and led by a lot more slaves and women than possibly we care to think about, or often is taught. So it's a huge. I don't know where to go with that on a question, but it's definitely something that I'm pondering.
it's much more difficult to navigate because it does get quite complicated quite quickly. Because I think what we do, we have certain facts, at each end, and then we often fill in the gaps in the middle with stuff that isn't necessarily clear, especially when it comes to the Bible, because on the one hand, we don't want to treat people with at least visible disabilities as projects to be fixed. That actually, you might believe the right things, but you're, in a sense, there's something inadequate about yourself that God needs to fix before you'll really accept it, before you've got the real thing. That to me is obviously flawed. But then on the other hand, you have to deal with Scripture where where Jesus heals visible disabilities. People who are lame, people people who cannot walk, who want to walk. They have some sort of physical disability that however you want to count, God fixes or in a way. And concepts of wholeness, physical wholeness, spiritual wholeness, physical wholeness, and you've got people who are blind and cannot see or can't hear who are healed, physically. So there is this.
It's got to be a tension.
So it's how do we how do we have both of those? How do we deal with that? And it's at least not obvious. And I think because people have not necessarily thought about it in great depth, there's probably a lot of misunderstanding, and I'm not even sure I know the answer. It's not something I've really reflected on a great deal, but there's definitely a tension there.
Yeah.
I think Christians. Go on.
There's a really great guy called Malcolm Duncan, and he says this. He says a church that doesn't have disabled people in it is disabling itself. And I just think that's really, really fascinating. And I think, the grace of God to reveal a huge blind spot in all of us at this time about what is church. Who are we? Are we really the body? I actually wanted to write a book on what lessons from lockdown on the body, and how by not having the body together, we've realized how we weren't ever really a body. And I wanted to have a chapter on race, a chapter on poverty, a chapter on disability. It didn't ever go anywhere, but I think that's really important. I've seen afresh, thanks to Malcolm and Emma Major and others, that we are disabling ourselves by not having disabled people in it. And actually what our church did, I thought was really nice, is it opened again early September with an audience of 12, and they were 12 handpicked people who had really struggled to attend online church. And we didn't then open for the, young and families for another 6 weeks. We just gave them a chance to get used to it. And I just think this whole thing about the body is really key right now, that we need to rethink about that. And I've been in church. I struggled with miscarriage and infertility for quite a few years. And I had people telling me weekly, "Nay, you'll get pregnant. God will provide you the baby." And I was just like, I can't handle this. Like, the Bible does not promise me a child. In fact, it promises me that childbirth is part of the curse. And actually, I'm far more in line with the Bible because I've suffered from a miscarriage and infertility than you're going to have a child. I did go on to have a child, but I think there's so many things we say that are not even biblical. It's just like those kind of miserable people in Job that are just making up rubbish. So we all need to get back into God's word to know, is what my friends are saying actually true? Is it biblical or not? But yeah, we've got to be really careful about people that are suffering or struggling. It's just not kind or fair to speak about that in a way. Like, there's sometimes just no empathy, and that's really sad.
Or a misplaced empathy.
Yeah,
maybe.
There is there's an assumption that because there's something that an able-bodied person would struggle to live like you, therefore you must want to be like me. There's this, but there is an element of, therefore I'm caring for you by asking, do you want prayer? And so there is an empathy, I think. I don't think it's done to be spiteful, but it's done out of maybe ignorance. It's misplaced. It's this understanding that maybe an overemphasis on the spiritual life that we're meant to have into the physical life. And it's again, another conversation may well be God and healing, and whether that happens, and maybe we can have that with you, Nay, or with another guest at some point. Just how do we handle that? And because it causes a lot of hurt, and I know a lot of people leave the church because they've been promised healing and it hasn't happened. They have this understanding of that's what should happen, and then also how people have interacted with them in places in the suffering of places like infertility, and often it's the ones that aren't as noticeable as well, that are we just can be really insensitive to each other. And that's part of relational living, being in community and trying to seek forgiveness. But sometimes that there's forgiveness, and then there's like, come on, we need to change. People can only forgive us so much.
It's hard because it's a problem that's never going to disappear. We're always going to have this problem because there is something about lived experience and experience in something that completely reorientates your view and your ability to show compassion, true compassion. Like you're saying, I think a lot of people, it's misplaced compassion. Like they have empathy and compassion, but they don't know how to organize it in a way that it's received well, because through that lack of experience. Now, the problem is we can't have lived experience of everything because that's just impossible. And so it's trying to find a way to navigate that of we're always going to encounter people within the church and outside the church that have experiences that we don't. But how do we empathize in a way that's not misplaced and upsetting? Like you were saying about issues with miscarriage and fertility issue. People say the most horrendous things that, if you were uncharitable, could be seen as evil in a way. But people don't mean it like that. But it's just the most insensitive thing. You think, I know you mean well, but just don't ever say that to anyone ever again. Because I know you didn't mean it, but that's just a horrible thing to say. And and the people, you just, I don't know, I think you always expect better of people in the church, and often they can be some of the most insensitive people, I think, in my experience, and that's because we're and that's not that's fine. I don't think that that my expectation is wrong. It's not in a way.
I think it's got worse though. Like, I don't know what you two think about mask wearing in Sweden and things like that, but like Twitter has just become this awful place to be, and Christians who you thought were your friends just wonder how on earth we could be friends anymore. And I've been reading this really interesting book called The Lonely Century by Narina Hertz. And it's really fascinating about societal loneliness and how she's wrote it in the pandemic, so it's really new. But just talks a lot about the loneliness that we feel and how we're all just getting more and more polarized, and by just listening to ourselves in the echo chambers that we have, it's getting worse and worse. And I've just seen that with Brexit a little bit, but then opinions on what you think about the pandemic, honestly, it's split my friends right down the middle. And that kind of separation and that feeling of I no longer belong anywhere, I don't belong to you and I don't belong to you, where I'm just lonely. And that's such a problem. And it back to the bit on disability, what I found really hard is my lovely male friends on Twitter being a little bit obsessed about going back to church in person. I can't wait to be back in the building. And it's just like, for my friends who can't go back, and a lot of them are female, I must admit, it is just painful to be hearing that. And the kind of excessive posting about, like anti-lockdown or let's be Sweden lovers. I've got nothing against Sweden. Is then just causing people that are isolating to feel like they don't belong, even in the church. Because when it's significant evangelical voices saying it, that's a problem. And so I just think there's something really sad happening about the way we speak publicly. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be into politics. I'm not saying we shouldn't have opinions, of course. But that when we so deeply offend people that are our Christian brothers and sisters in Christ, who actually we know, they're not just randoms on Twitter, they're friends. That's really sad. Like, I don't know what's going on. Really.
I think one of the issues, what social media has done, it's allowed us to know too much about people, like in a way, because those same conversations, if they were had in person, would never deteriorate to the level they do when they're online, because we all know this. You know, if we're having a conversation, you know, we've developed to, you know, if I say something to you, I'm picking up subconscious cues, and I'm naturally empathetic, sharing it. We're naturally empathetic to each other. As soon as you remove that barrier, just our inner, nasty person comes out. And I've had issues where you've known people for years, and they suddenly find, I didn't know you thought that. We can't be friends, but we've known each other for years, like decades, and they, and it's we know a little bit too much about it, but like it can't. It
Is that
scares me.
just recently, Dan? Is that just recently that?
I'd say the last 5 years, I would say.
Oh, okay.
Because
so
as we've become more polarized, like there's everyone's splintering off into smaller and smaller groups. So even within things that started out as good, so even if we're talking about something like social justice, okay, and I mean that in the most normal, non-left-wing woke sense, just social justice. We can agree
that is about social.
The concept of social justice, in itself. I'm not going to get into equity and all this, but that in itself, within something that should be good, people have deteriorated into these smaller and smaller groups, and every group has, even when you get into disability, I mean, it very quickly deteriorates into, arguments about which terms are acceptable. You said that, right? We can never speak again. You're a different kind of disability advocate group. And these are things that we need to be, focus on what we agree on, but just getting torn apart. And I don't know. I get again, as I said, as a natural pessimist, I feel like you said that, but socially isolated, because I think like I don't have my own people. I feel like I don't have any people. There's a few people, and I don't want to have to feel like I have to agree with everyone just to have friends that agree with me. I like people who think differently, and on Twitter I just don't go on there very much. I just post work stuff because it's just toxic, and I come away thinking just what a horrible world we live in, and everyone's really mean and horrible. People. And actually, Twitter's self-selecting. Most nice people just aren't on Twitter. If there's anyone you really, really like who's nice, they're not on Twitter. Everyone if I think of like 10 people I really love, none of them are on Twitter.
There are so I will stand up for Twitter a little bit, marginally. I think you can, because there's some interactions we've had. Like London Theist came on, I've met him through Twitter, but generally speaking, I come off Twitter feeling.
I reckon about 1% of the dialogue on there is valuable and
that's probably true. On that note, we are going to have Tom Price on the 26th of November talking about how to bring a little bit more of this, I think, community on things like Twitter, and how to not get that echo chamber of vitriol that often happens, especially on YouTube and things. So we'll have a bit more of that kind of conversation. I'm realizing we're close to the sort of 2-hour mark, and I don't know about you, but it's feeling like it's been great. There's lots to think about. And
more than 5 more minutes. Should we have 5 minutes?
Yeah. So I mean, there's been a load of resources you've shared as we've gone through this, Nay, and our last few minutes of conversation are generally around resources anyway. So we shared, just going through the stuff that you're talking about. So does IFES have their own sort of resource bank at all for, like, if anyone's sort of near students or Is there, just wondering, because Friends International does, but I was just wondering if IFES does any of that.
Our resources are our people. So
Okay.
no, we don't.
Yeah.
No, we don't. We have got a website, but I think maybe there might be in a year's time, but no, our resources are our people for now.
That's fair enough. Yeah, that's cool. So there's IFES that you work for, and some of the things that they do with Passion for Evangelism is passionforevangelism.com. Is that right? Or is there a website, or is it on Facebook?
No. So hang on. There's the Stories of Hope blog, which is an evangelistic blog with women writers. I think if I sent you the link for that. And then there's a Facebook page and a closed Facebook group. So you can get to the closed group from the Facebook page. We're also at PFE Women on Instagram and Twitter. So find us on any of those. But if you want to write for us or come and be part of the community, then just come and find us on those places or in those places.
Awesome. So I'll put those in the description. Go on, Dan.
Who are some of the people you mentioned that we should get on? Phil's going to take a note of it.
Oh yeah, so I mean, I know loads of brilliant people. So Kay Morgan Gurr on disability, Tanya Marlowe on disability, Ellie Cook and Karen Saul just did a brilliant night for us on shame, abuse, and Jesus. That was phenomenal. I don't know who else I talked about. Sorry, I can't remember. I'll remember and send you a message.
So a female.
Inonge, still Luca.
Yes.
Yeah, she's great. Overflow chat. Look at that. That's amazing. That's her podcast, website, blog.
Yeah, that'll be good.
She started following us around the time we had Claire Williams on, I think, and then.
Claire's great.
Sort of connected with Inonge, so she's one to.
We'll get Claire back on.
Yeah,
I want to have
we barely got through.
Yeah,
barely got through our conversation with her. That's good. We had a whole bunch of things prepared for critical race and ended up talking about slavery instead. And then
she's fascinating. And actually, I really recommend you watch that night that we did on justice. My brain's going now. Look on the Passion for Evangelism YouTube. It's all there.
We'll get them on there.
Yeah.
Final thing, like top 4, and it can be something you've already mentioned. Top 3 or 4 or 5 books, resources for dealing with lockdown and evangelism that you've
lockdown
doesn't have to be specific Christianity.
Okay, let me just think about evangelism, because no one's really written about lockdown. I mean, I'm reading something called Contending for the Faith, and it's all about the Second World War and IFES history, and about how students basically saw that the spirit wasn't in chains, that the spirit didn't depend on material conditions. So that is a good book. But probably evangelism, Sam Chan, Evangelism in a Skeptical World, is phenomenal. Rebecca Manley Pippett's new book, Stay Salt, is phenomenal. I love John Lennox's Where's God in a COVID World. That's great. I'm trying to think of things I've read recently.
That's good. We can always add stuff. And what was the socially isolated one you mentioned? That sounded really interesting.
Oh yeah, The Lonely Century by Narina Hertz. That's really interesting. Yeah, I definitely recommend that.
Right, let me type that into my.
If you want to really understand how some women feel, read The Confidence Code by Katty Kay. She's a journalist. Really, really interesting book on insight into kind of confidence in women across the world.
Amazing. No, it's been so good chatting. Loads to think through, and I'm sure we'll do it again at some point soon, hopefully. With any of those Passion for Evangelism blogs, if you spot a decent one, send it through. We can put it on our blog as well. Very happy to share that. That kind of goes, if anyone watching this is a blog writer and you love Jesus, well, even if you want to have something that's a bit critical, I'm sure we'll think about it. We are critical witness after all. Happy to engage in that front as well. So before I make my final comments, anything else, Dan?
No, just thank you. That is really interesting, and I feel just I got lots of ideas and encouraged listening to you and stuff. So
thanks so much for having me on. I mean, it means a lot to women actually when we get invited to speak. I've never really done these kind of things before the last few months, and just means a lot to women when you get asked to do something. So thanks, men, for standing with us.
No worries.
It genuinely
guys.
means a lot. So yeah,
That's good to know.
Cool. It's
Our pleasure.
And we're learning, so it's all good. Yeah, so much to think about. Cool. I'll close up. And for those of you who, that's Dan. There's me. There we go. For those of you watching online, thank you so much for being a part of it, and for the questions that came in from the programmer. Hopefully we've engaged with them. If you would like to follow Nay's advice and support the show so that we can get this onto Facebook and YouTube and wherever else, it does cost some money, and I'm having to save some for house adaptations at the moment, so I can't pay for it. So if you want to bless us by supporting this work, then please do patreon.com Critical Witness. And otherwise, we're going to be doing this anyway on YouTube, Facebook, and yeah, it's a pleasure to have people like Nay talk to us and share their journey and all that they've learned with us. So thanks for watching, and have a very good rest of your week. And there you go, got some waves from Nay and Dan.